And then I will just tidy this up a little bit. And I shall crack on, make a start. So yes, as I said, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on nutritional strategies for cognitive decline with me, Nina Bailey. So I get that going. Okay, so yes, so when I think about the amount of time I actually personally spend looking for my own phone or keys or purse or whatever it is that I think I've lost, I quite often wonder if it's just sort of normal part of aging or whether it's something that I need to kind of consider as something more seriously. But I guess it's kind of like when we think about the processes that are related to sort of cognitive decline and sort of further down the stream to sort of full-blown dementia. We know that they kind of damage the brain very many years, if not decades, before symptoms actually become apparent and cause this sort of progressive decline in functioning as more of the brain becomes damaged. And I think what's really kind of key and what is really clear, especially when we start to sort of like look at some of the evidence, is that early intervention really is key to slowing or preventing cognitive decline. But as with all of these kind of things, when we look at the evidence as well, everything is not quite as black and white as we would like it is. And I think really that we need to have a better understanding of the mechanisms that are involved. And when we're kind of approaching from a sort of nutritional kind of intervention, we need to look at sort of dietary factors that influence cognitive health. So that we can get an insight of the actual sort of the optimum window time, as it were, when dietary intervention is actually most beneficial. So is there a stage within our sort of lifestyle where, you know, it's really key or optimum, obviously sort of starting younger the better. But, you know, as we get older, we need to sort of make considerations there as well. So we have, you know, our well-established risk factors for cognitive decline. Some of them are, of course, modifiable and some of them aren't. So we know that, you know, there is an age issue. So as we get older, we are at a slightly sort of higher risk for developing cognitive decline and dementias. And also there's a sort of genetic link there as well, and I've kind of listed ApoE4 as it's one of the sort of most common genetic sort of risk factors for Alzheimer's disease specifically. And if you're unfortunate to inherit 2 copies of the ApoE4, then you are significantly or at a significantly higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease than if you have one of the other variants. And then we have kind of factors such as, you know, being overweight and obese, risk factors for things like metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular, poor cardiovascular health, such as hypertension, high levels of lipids and cholesterol. If we have type 2 diabetes, we're all of these factors are known to increase our risk for cognitive decline. And then we've got sort of issues associated with things like sort of mental and social stimulation, sort of education, and things like activity. You know, if we sit around a lot and we don't get active, then again we kind of have another sort of risk factor for cognitive decline. And then we've got things like smoking. And then we can look at things like nutrient and lifestyle factors as well. So things like glycated hemoglobin. If we don't eat things like sort of Mediterranean style diet, which I'll talk about a little bit later, we know things like low omega-3 status, or if you don't eat your oily fish, low B-vits, low vitamin D, antioxidants. So there's, I mean, I can sort of list them all off, but they're sort of there so that you can see them for yourselves. But there are a vast amount of nutrient and lifestyle factors that are all known to be modifiable that increase our risk of developing sort of poor cognitive health, leading through into sort of full-blown dementia if we're unfortunate enough. But if we look at all the sort of list that we've just looked at the last slide, we can sort of like look at them and say, right, okay, so they're all kind of associated with our sort of Western style diet and our Western style lifestyle. So, you know, we're living in an environment now where we have quite a high toxic stress load. You know, our mental stress is much higher. We don't exercise as much. Our food choices have all sort of changed quite dramatically over the last few decades. And we know that there are sort of various triggers from our chronically kind of altered diets, coupled with this sort of psycho-emotional stress that negatively influences the sort of the resolution step of the inflammatory response. And we get sort of chronic overactivity of our systemic stress system, which then sort of suppresses the whole kind of resolution step, of the immune system, which then sort of increases our risk of developing chronic low-grade inflammation that then puts us or makes us susceptible to sort of excessive inflammation. And then when we consider sort of high levels of inflammation, we can then sort of link this through to sort of increased levels of things like free radicals and reactive oxygen species, and high levels of oxidative stress. And this is one of the sort of key areas of relating high levels of oxidative stress to the majority of neurodegenerative diseases, because these are characterized by aggregates and inclusions of these sort of aberrant proteins, such as obviously the amyloid beta and tau, associated with things like Alzheimer's disease. We are actually quite lucky in as much as sort of nature looks after us, and we do have sort of systems set in place like the ubiquitin proteasome system, which is responsible for sort of clearing all these sort of toxic protein aggregates. But what we find is that if you have very high levels of reactive oxygen species, they not only kind of interfere or sort of get this sort of overflow of the proteasome by increasing the amount of damaged proteins to be removed, but actually ROS can actually directly oxidize and damage the proteasomal subunits themselves, and this then sort of decreases their catalytic activity. So we end up not being able to basically cope with the amount of modified proteins that there are in the brain. This leads to sort of abnormal misfolding and aggregation, leading to neural dysfunction, neuronal death, and then finally to sort of neuronal or neurodegeneration. So anything through from sort of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, depending on the protein that's actually being sort of messed about with, if you like. And so we've got our little ROS symbol here, and we've got all these sort of factors that are sort of bombarding and increasing the amount of reactive oxygen species. So anything, things like pollution, trauma, injury, inflammation, stress, and even sort of, you know, everyday byproducts from metabolism can all impact on these levels of reactive oxygen species and increase our sort of load of oxidative stress products. And then we can sort of look at other areas such as the impact of oxidative stress and inflammation on neurotrophins. So these are the proteins within the brain that play a role in the maintenance and repair and genesis of various neurons. And then sort of that leads through to things like serotonin and noradrenergic neurons. And I've included brain-derived neurotrophic factor as an example because it's kind of one of the most sort of famous ones and most researched, if you like. And it's really important in regulating neuronal survival, plasticity, and it's considered to be a really good biomarker for cognitive decline. And we know that high levels of oxidative stress and inflammation downregulate brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which then interferes with the normal growth and survival of dendritic neurons, which then goes on to sort of decrease branching and increases atrophy and death of neurons, again sort of leading to various states of sort of cognitive decline. We've then got the impact of things like stress and inflammation, so inflammatory biomarkers such as interleukins 1, interleukin 6, TNF-alpha, high levels of cortisol from sort of chronic stress, interfere with the kynurenine pathway, and this is an important pathway that regulates the amount of sort of things like serotonin within the body. When you get overactivity of enzymes which are involved in this pathway, we get the shift away from serotonin production, and tryptophan is kind of pushed down this other pathway where we start to see elevated levels of quinolinic acid, for example. And this then accumulates in certain areas of the brain, and this is linked to cognitive issues as well, because one of the sort of impacts of high levels of quinolinic acid is that it's neurotoxic, overstimulates NMDA, triggering neuronal apoptosis. So again, we start to see this kind of issue. So you can see high levels of quinolinic acid in various sections of the brain, in individuals with sort of mood disorders and individuals with neurodegenerative diseases as well. So if you downregulate the pathway that makes serotonin, then this starts to sort of interfere with sort of mental health and with sleep, obviously, with serotonin producing melatonin. So that's another kind of mechanistic pathway that we can sort of interfere with. I've gone a bit too far there. And then, of course, we have homocysteine cycling. So homocysteine is a natural byproduct of the methylation cycle, and this is a process which we know is vitally important for producing things like neurotransmitters. It's involved in cell cycle regulation, synthesis of neuronal proteins, for example, but it's also really important in liver detoxification processes. If we have high levels of homocysteine, usually, and I'm talking I'm talking here about poor recycling due to issues with things like B vitamins, so vitamin B6, folate, and vitamin B12. If we don't have enough of these B vits, then we accumulate homocysteine. We get reduced glutathione production, which then sort of compromises our detox pathways, which then is obviously going to sort of interfere when it comes to sort of dealing with high levels of oxidative stress. But then this is again sort of linked through to sort of neurotransmitter production, so it can interfere with normal mood as well. But anything that sort of compromises our normal methylation cycle can be implicated in accelerated aging. So it's really important that we look after our methylation cycle. So I've just included this like little diagram in here and sort of highlight some of the roles and benefits of making sure that we look after our sort of methylation cycle. So we need to get our micronutrient status nice and healthy. So anything from sort of neurotransmitter production to antioxidant activity, again, homocysteine is known to play a role in sort of cardiovascular health, so and detoxification. We've got things like anti-inflammatory, looking after the normal cell cycle, and so on. So we need to make sure that our methylation cycle is cycling nicely. So when it comes to looking at sort of the link between homocysteine and cognitive decline, again, sort of if you look at observational studies, we know that elevated homocysteine is associated with cognitive decline, white matter damage, brain atrophy, neurofibrillary tangles, and dementia. And it's therefore it's a very strong modifiable risk factor for things like vascular dementia, certainly, and for Alzheimer's disease. And there have been many studies that have shown an association between cognitive deficit or dementia and high homocysteine and stroke or low vitamin B status. When it actually comes to looking at sort of dietary intervention using folate, B6 and or B12 to lower homocysteine, again, as with many of these sort of dietary intervention studies, the results can be, can be a little bit cloudy. And unfortunately, there have been a lot of very badly designed studies out there. A lot of the homocysteine lowering trials with folic acid and B6 or B12 tested as protective agents against cognitive decline, quite often actually include a lot of subjects in there who are actually unlikely to benefit during the trial period anyway. Whereas trials that actually look at high-risk subjects and actually take into account actual baseline B vitamin status actually show much better and more beneficial results. So basically, when we're looking at interventions, the benefit of interventions are most apparent in individuals who have high homocysteine and low vitamin B status. So that's something to sort of take on board as well. So quite often testing either homocysteine levels or BVITs in clients can be really invaluable. And again, when we look at actually intervention with B6, B12 and folate, or a mix of them, we know, looking at the studies, that these three micronutrients do actually lower homocysteine levels. However, whether the actual capacity to lower homocysteine then reflects in long-term improved cognitive status seems to be something that again is a little bit cloudy. So we need sort of better, well-designed studies to sort of support and show that lowering homocysteine leads to an improvement in cognitive function. I would suggest that personally I would prefer for my homocysteine levels to be nice and healthy rather than nice and high, I guess. And then we look at omega-3 fatty acids, of course. So our brain is packed with fat, and within that fat we've got omega-6 and we've got omega-3. So predominantly we've got arachidonic acid on the omega-6 side, and we've got DHA primarily on the omega-3 side, and then we've got omega-3 EPA, which tends to sort of circulate around the brain, looking after our sort of inflammatory status and things like that. We know that both types of fatty acids, omega-6 and omega-3, play a major structural component of the brain. They're essential to things like brain structure and mass. They're involved in sort of neurotransmitter signaling. They help to support things like memory, focus, and attention. And we see from sort of observational studies that individuals with the highest omega-3 intake tend to have sort of plumper brains, if you like. And when we're looking at sort of cognitive function, we know that people who have the highest omega-3 intakes, whether it be through supplements or through fish and marine foods, tend to have a lower risk of dementia. So we need to be making sure that we get a nice dose of omega-3 fatty acids. And then something that I find quite interesting as well is that if we look at the impact of high levels of oxidative stress on sort of methylation cycle and the impact that then that has on our capacity to sort of make long chain fatty acids and incorporate them into our cell membranes, what we see, and this is quite a nice paper actually if anybody's sort of really interested in this particular area, is that during high levels of oxidative stress, the one carbon cycle actually shifts away from this sort of methylation cycle, so down this pathway down here. So we actually have a reduced capacity to sort of incorporate omega-3 into our cell membranes. And at the same time, we actually get, because obviously long-chain fatty acids are susceptible to peroxidation, we actually, because there's high levels of oxidative stress, we actually get peroxidation products. So our omega-3s and our omega-6s actually give rise to pro-inflammatory products. So that's not very good. However, when we have high levels of oxidative stress, the one carbon cycle kind of naturally adapts and it shifts. So whilst it's shifting away from this side, it's actually shunting homocysteine down to make higher levels of glutathione. So we have sort of antioxidant support. But obviously this is not sustainable long term. So eventually we will kind of, I was going to say run out of glutathione, but our glutathione making capacity will be compromised unless we are supporting it nutritionally. But it's just quite interesting, actually, that the impact of oxidative stress actually has on fatty acid status, which then, when we think about the role of omega-3s in sort of brain structure and function, and the role of omega-3s in sort of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, DHA, for example, in vitro and in animal models of Alzheimer's disease, has actually been shown to reduce the production of beta amyloid. However, and this is the important thing, low levels of DHA have been shown to be decreased, or sorry, DHA levels are decreased in the post-mortem brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. And we know that people with Alzheimer's disease also have reduced blood DHA levels, which is quite interesting. DHA, therefore, is of great interest when we look at sort of nutritional intervention for sort of neurodegenerative diseases, and especially Alzheimer's disease. So there have been numerous studies looking at dietary intervention with DHA for the management of symptoms related to Alzheimer's disease and other neurocognitive issues. And that's kind of not surprising when we think that omega-3 DHA is actually the predominant omega-3 within sort of brain tissue. And DHA has numerous biological properties that would obviously be beneficial. So anything from sort of looking at sort of neurotransmission to sort of growth and development of neurites. And it actually gives rise to its own little family of anti-inflammatory products called pro-resolvins. And as I said in my previous slide, that DHA is associated generally with a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease by decreasing amyloid beta production. However, when we actually look at dietary interventions purely with DHA, again, the study findings tend to be a little bit cloudy, and this is an example that I've included. This is quite a sort of well referenced study. It's the Omega D study. So it was a 6-month intervention with 1.7 grams of DHA and 0.6 grams of EPA in Alzheimer patients, and they found that there were no benefits from sort of quite a high concentration EPA DHA supplement. However, what the groups found was that in a very small subgroup of individuals with more mild cognitive dysfunction, there was a significant reduction in sort of cognitive decline. They then also showed that that significant benefit then disappeared when they adjusted for body weight. So the kind of outcome, and what I find quite important to sort of relay from this study, was that they found a kind of a dose-response relationship between plasma levels of omega-3 and the preservation of cognition. But generally, the association tends to be in individuals with mild cognitive dysfunction rather than people with sort of full-blown dementia. But there is this need to take into account body weight. So we need to sort of dose based on body weight rather than do this sort of fixed one-size-fits-all approach to omega-3 dosing. And we're finding this with numerous other studies as well. So anything through from like mood disorders through to cardiovascular interventions as well. So going away from this sort of one-size-fits-all approach. However, okay, so intervention with pure DHA or EPA and DHA can be beneficial, but this is where it gets quite interesting, really, is because both EPA and DHA are obviously susceptible to lipid peroxidation, multiple double bonds, and if you've got high levels of free radicals and oxidative stress, then you're going to be exposing your omega-3 fatty acids to an environment where they might auto-oxidize and induce lipid peroxidation, which would then increase our sort of oxidative stress load. And this is, when it comes to sort of like interventions and dosing, this kind of, the the susceptibility of, particularly of DHA, is really important. Because if you think about some of the studies where some of the sort of high doses that are involved, if you give high doses of DHA and it's just oxidized, then you're not going to see benefits. And this is one of the kind of theories that is being thrown around in regards to some of the sort of dietary interventions using DHA or high strength DHA with some EPA in the management of symptoms associated with some of the sort of degenerative diseases. So, and we can see this as well. So we know that lipid peroxidation is elevated, again, sort of using sort of post-mortem brains. We see that high levels of these sort of lipid peroxidation products are derived from both arachidonic acid, but we also see oxidized DHA as well. So in normal conditions, and I say normal as in sort of a relatively healthy person who isn't sort of compromised when it comes to sort of their capacity to reduce oxidative stress, then DHA tends to have a sort of preventative role. However, when we look at the impact of oxidized DHA, it's rather different, because oxidized DHA, in comparison to unoxidized DHA, can actually increase amyloid precursor protein processing. And I've got a little diagram here to sort of explain a little bit of this to you. So when we think about the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids, we tend to think of the sort of eicosanoid producing benefits. So the eicosanoids from EPA, for example, prostaglandins, thromboxans, leukotrienes, tend to be associated with decreased inflammation. And then we've got docosanoids from DHA, which tend to be neuroprotective. This is fine as long as we're going down this enzymic route. We obviously also know that arachidonic acid gives rise to eicosanoids that are pro-inflammatory. As long as we've got a balance between the two of these, then, you know, we've got sort of, we stay in homeostasis, as it were. However, when we've got high levels of chronic stress and lipid peroxidation, sorry, not lipid peroxidation, ROS, sorry, what we find is that these fatty acids tend to give rise to rather harmful lipid peroxidation products. So arachidonic acid gives rise to HNEs, EPA, HHEs, and again DHA as well, HHEs. And these are actually, can be quite harmful under the sort of wrong conditions, as it were. And one of the issues with oxidized DHA, as I sort of said in one of my earlier slides, is that even small amounts of oxidized DHA is enough to reverse some of the beneficial effects. So obviously in the sort of Alzheimer's disease brain, we have high levels of reactive oxygen species, which oxidizes DHA. DHA oxidized form increases secretase enzymes, which then sort of exacerbates this these sort of protein fragments here. So the kind of whole kind of oxidized DHA thing might actually explain why some of the sort of results, or some of the different results that are obtained in some of the studies dealing with DHA. And certainly whether a small contamination of oxidized DHA can actually lead to some of the negative or neutral study results that we see sometimes. So I guess really kind of the message is that when you're giving omega-3 supplements, they really should be combined with an appropriate antioxidant, especially in kind of high-risk individuals. So somebody who is sort of compromised in regards to their sort of antioxidant coping capabilities. And then this is just a little slide just to sort of show you some of the issues that are associated with HNE derived from arachidonic acid. And this is quite often found in high levels within the brain as well. When there's high levels of oxidative stress, obviously arachidonic acid is in high levels within the brain as well. which is fine. I mean, at sort of physiological or low stress levels, most of 4-HNE is actually detoxified via glutathione. It's only when glutathione levels become compromised, when we can't, meet the same sort of capacity, that these levels accumulate and eventually will sort of cause irreversible cell damage. So again, we need to be really careful that we are maintaining really good antioxidant status. And then just one slide, really, just because I'd like to mention the role of gut flora. In several of our sort of past webinars, we've sort of talked a little bit about the importance of looking after sort of gut health in relation to sort of dysbiosis, which is known to result in low-grade inflammation. And there is a strong sort of flurry of evidence coming out quite recently showing that there is this sort of significant correlation between changes in sort of gut flora and cognitive behavior as well. And this is because our gut flora influence a certain number of sort of neurotransmitters, anything through from GABA to glutamate to serotonin and so on. And if you disrupt your normal gut flora by something like antibiotic treatment, you can significantly reduce the amount of receptors for glutamate, so NMDA, in the hippocampus itself, which is known to be important for regulating, things like neuronal survival, dendrite and axon development, and so on. So, I mean, I mentioned sort of neurotoxicity of NMDA earlier, but if you downregulate NMDA, then it can be just as harming as having overactivity as well. And again, if we look at sort of animal models, so if we look at germ-free mice, the development of the HPA axis, our natural sort of inbuilt mechanisms for dealing with stress, is known to be abnormal, and this then obviously alters our response to stress, and this can then go on to reduce the expression of neurotrophins such as brain-derived neurotrophic factors. So we can start to sort of see this picture of how diet and altered gut physiology then sort of leads through to high levels of inflammation and cognitive decline. And then this is just to kind of show you the sort of link through from dysbiosis, and especially if it's kind of coupled with high intakes of saturated fat, for example, how this can stimulate the activity of nuclear factor kappa B, sorry, I went a bit blank there, especially when it's coupled with sort of increased inflammation from inflammatory stimulus such as tissue injury, psychological stress, and so on. So nuclear factor kappa B activity or increased activity then sort of increases inflammation through things like phospholipase, COX, LOX, cytokines, which so we get high levels of inflammation, which can then sort of exacerbate the whole kind of process, linking through to poor cognitive health. Okay, so that's a few of the sort of mechanisms and factors that sort of influence sort of cognitive decline. But how do we actually combat cognitive decline? So on top of things like, keeping relatively healthy, present things like healthy diets, antioxidant supplements can be very beneficial. But really it's about preventing nutritional deficiencies. Combining this with some moderate physical activity could be considered to be the first line of defense against the development and the progression of pre-dementia and dementia syndromes. So this is where we start to talk about how healthy diets can be very health positive and help to look after our brains and our cognitive function. And of course, we have to sort of really kind of mention the Mediterranean style diet. So this was first described in the 7-country study back in the 1950s and 60s, and where it was observed that individuals of South Europe and so on had adult life expectancy, which was one of the highest in the world. And they also had sort of very low rates of things like heart disease, cancers, and other sort of nutrition-related chronic diseases. So this sort of Mediterranean-style diet appears to sort of protect you from sort of these inflammatory conditions. But what's really important is that this diet really kind of is thought to exert its effects on sort of cognitive health through multiple biological mechanisms. So, you know, we're talking about sort of reducing the risk of chronic sort of cardiovascular issues, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, all sort of come together because they're all together. These are associated with mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease. We know that if you stick to a Mediterranean diet, you know, it helps to regulate metabolic control, blood sugar, glucose sugar, insulin sensitivity, and so on. And we know that the Mediterranean diet also helps to dampen oxidative stress. So we know that this kind of increases naturally in age. But if you have a nice, healthy Mediterranean-style diet, you tend to have low levels or lower levels of oxidative stress. And have there been any randomized controlled trials? So it's all very well sort of having observational trials, but yeah, you do need your sort of dietary intervention studies to sort of kind of prove these things, I guess. And yes, the answer is yes. There have been a number of well-developed, well-designed studies that have shown that if you adhere to a diet that is sort of high Mediterranean style, especially if it's supplemented with olive oil or mixed nuts, can be beneficial in comparison with a low-fat controlled diet. Certainly in older populations can help improve cognitive function. But what's really kind of clear is that this is not an overnight fix. So both of these studies that I've kind of put up here as an example imply that, you know, it's a good few years that you have to sort of really adhere to a diet like this. So what is it about the Mediterranean style diet that is so wonderful when it comes to looking after our brain? Well, when we kind of look at the components, so we've got, you know, the Mediterranean diet is high in things like olive oil and fruit and vegetables, oily fish, nuts and seeds, legumes, lean meat, coupled with sort of moderate dairy and a little bit of red wine. I mean, the original, going back to the 40s and 50s, the original, I'll put my fingers in the air here, Mediterranean style diet was also, you know, very locally sourced. It was all very fresh, grass-fed. You know, you went to your neighbours for your milk, and you swapped that with, you know, eggs from your chickens and so on. It has changed rather a lot over the last sort of couple of decades, but we still kind of tend to think of it as sort of being very high in these kind of foods. And then when we break down the components that are within these foods, we start looking at the actual sort of active ingredients, as it were. So, you know, things like red wine and olive oil and fruit and veg are high in antioxidants such as polyphenols. We've got high intake of oleic acid, which is known to be incredibly good for looking after cardiovascular health. We've got our omega-3 fatty acids, which are obviously, buffing up our brains. We've got various minerals and amino acids, vitamin D, vitamins A, B, C, and so on. And all of these together, and this is it, this is this sort of synergistic effect of these nutrients that actually have effect on things like membrane fluidity and nutrient metabolism, glucose transport, cerebral blood flow, and so on. That, you know, together they increase these benefits, and at the same time they are having a sort of a lowering on things like sort of neuroinflammation, reduction in things like free radicals, blood pressure, oxidative damage, and together as a sort of a mass, these nutrients are helping to keep our brains healthy. One of the sort of like key factors of a Mediterranean diet is obviously, you know, the amount of oily fish they eat. And as I sort of stated a little bit earlier on, there is an association between fish consumption and sort of cognitive health, and lower sort of risk of developing dementia. People who eat fish tend to have sort of plumper brains, as it were, and even sort of elderly people who eat fish or seafood just once a week are at a lower risk of developing dementia. And then, you know, we have our sort of meta-analysis studies, and there's a good one here that I've sort of published very recently, have found that increasing fish and omega-3 fatty acids is associated with a statistically significant lower risk of developing dementia, Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, and Parkinson's disease as well. So there is a really good strong link between fish consumption and cognitive health. And some of you out there will have already sort of seen the sort of headlines that sort of came out earlier this year. This lovely little graph here is taken from a study that was published quite recently, looking at the sort of global patterns of omega-3. And as you can see, the little UK there is nice and red. And this is an indication of how much EPA and DHA is actually in our red blood cells. So it's looking at the omega-3 index. And when it comes to sort of looking at the amount of omega-3 that we're actually consuming, what seems to be quite evident is that there is a big difference between how much omega-3 we're actually advised to consume, how much we're actually consuming, and how much we need to consume. So, for example, this study by Flock et al. in 2013 suggested that if you were a 77 kilogram individual and you wanted to raise your omega-3 index from 4.2 to 8, you'd need about just over 1 gram, 1.5 grams, something like that, omega-3 daily to achieve an omega-3 index of 8%. And this is currently something that we are not doing. And again, you know, our recommendations at the moment are about 0.5 gram a day, and we're not really even kind of achieving that still. So the likelihood that the majority of us in the UK are deficient in omega-3 is very rife, and this study published in 2016 kind of tells us that that's true. So if we actually kind of look at the relationship between omega-3 index and cognitive health, I've just kind of plucked a fairly recent study published in 2015, looking at the omega-3 index in terms of sort of cognitive processing. And this study, if you want to have a look at it yourselves, it was quite interesting because the poor Dutch adolescents were actually relatively low in omega-3 status anyway. So I think the average omega-3 index was just over 4%. But what they did show was that out of the sort of tests that they performed, those individuals who had the highest omega-3 index did better on sort of things like processing speed and impulsivity than those children or adolescents that had lower omega-3s. So there is a relationship between sort of cognitive function and actual omega-3 levels. And then again, a kind of a reverse study, really. So this is a nice review, again, fairly recent, 2012, looking at cognitive enhancement by omega-3 fatty acids, looking at it from sort of childhood through to old age. And they basically kind of report that those who have the lowest omega-3 intake tend to have, no, I've got that wrong way around, sorry. The benefits from dietary intervention with omega-3 tend to be in those individuals who have the lowest levels of omega-3. So if you have low levels and you increase your omega-3 intake, then you are going to achieve the best benefits, if that makes sense. Okay, so if we look at omega-3 and cognitive decline, so this is kind of touching back onto one of the studies that I spoke about earlier, so the omega D study, as it was. So a meta-analysis looking at the sort of neurophysiological benefits of omega-3 in actual sort of randomized controlled trials, again, tends to show that the benefits are more pronounced in individuals who are or who have sort of initial symptoms of mild cognitive decline rather than those who are sort of full-blown Alzheimer's disease. But what they actually also showed as well was that, you know, sort of normal, sort of healthy people quite often don't sort of experience the kind of benefit. So it's that sort of thing of, you know, if you're symptomatic, you're more likely to sort of feel the benefits from sort of raising omega-3 levels. But that's not to say that there aren't any benefits from sort of keeping your omega-3 levels nice and high. But what this study kind of pointed out was that the effects of omega-3 certainly on cognitive decline are not uniform, and it's really important that we actually identify potentially responsive populations. The other thing that they kind of pointed out was that nutrients tend to work synergistically rather than in isolation, and incorporating your omega-3 with other nutrients is really, really important. So the real kind of key to reducing cognitive decline can sort of really be kind of broken down. So we need to look at reducing oxidative damage, increasing antioxidant enzymes, making sure that our homocysteine levels are nicely managed. Blood pressure is obviously a key thing, certainly when we're looking at sort of vascular dementias. We need to make sure that our inflammatory processes are nice and healthy. We need to look at sort of increasing cellular energy, optimizing neuroprotection, enhancing neurogenesis, supporting nice healthy cell membrane integrity, and optimizing our neurotransmitter levels. And again, what seems to be really key is that early intervention is key for successful outcomes. So the earlier on in our lives that we actually start eating healthy and maybe supplementing it at times when necessary, the more likely we are to sort of reap the benefits into older age. So this is where we kind of start looking at what's actually going on within the sort of UK population, and you may be aware that the sort of National Diet and Nutrition Survey has very recently published its latest results, and there are some sort of key things to sort of like pick out from it. Only about 8% of 11 to 18-year-olds are actually consuming their 5-a-day fruit and vegetables, so their micronutrient intakes are going to be relatively low. And overall, only about a third of the UK population are really kind of meeting the targets for fruit and veg. As I pointed out earlier, consumption of oily fish is still very low. We're supposed to eat one portion of oily fish a week, 140 grams, and we're still not really achieving that. So it's about half of that at the moment. And you may be aware as well of some headlines that sort of reported fairly recently, indicating that actually the amount of omega-3 that is present within farmed fish is reduced by about half in the last sort of few years. So, you know, even if we're eating oily fish fairly regularly, we may not actually be consuming as much omega-3 as we actually think we are. So this is where maybe sort of topping up with a good quality omega-3 supplement can be beneficial on top of the oily fish itself. And the survey actually pointed out some really key nutrient deficiencies as well, such as vitamin A and D, and iron as well. Women and girls tend to be under the recommendations for things like riboflavin and zinc, and many adults appear to be under-consuming things like magnesium, selenium, and potassium. And when you think about sort of the role of vitamin D, magnesium, selenium in cognitive and brain health, then, you know, we really can't afford to be low in these really sort of essential micronutrients. When it comes to looking after brain health through antioxidant consumption, I mean, the sort of key message here is we need to be eating a diverse variety of fruits and vegetables because, you know, different rainbow colors, that kind of thing, different products, different ingredients, different fruits, different vegetables contain a flurry, a different variety of important sort of polyphenols and antioxidants that are known to sort of prevent, inhibit, or repair the damage that is caused by reactive oxidant species. Our poor little brain proteins, lipids, and DHA are very vulnerable to oxidative damage. So making sure that we consume a nice variety of fruit and veg and things like that is really, really important. So on top of eating a kind of ideally a Mediterranean style diet, one that is rich in omega-6 and omega-3 and olive oil and that kind of thing, what do hygienists recommend when it comes to things like products on top of this? So for those of you who are sort of familiar with hygienists, you probably be aware of our Farmipa range. So we have a sort of like two-tier approach really to sort of managing inflammation. So our product Farmipa Restore, which is a pure EPA, is designed really as a sort of 3-month intervention to reduce inflammation and to reduce the impact of sort of oxidative stress at a cellular level. And then after about 3 months, we recommend introducing a small amount of DHA and some GLA from organic evening primrose oil as another source of anti-inflammatory. So when it comes to looking after brain structure and function and adding some anti-inflammatory benefits, we would certainly recommend our sort of high-strength omega-3 fish oils. And then, as I've stated quite adamantly really, is that it's really important to make sure that we have good antioxidants to support good cognitive health. And so we would definitely, certainly for cognitive health, recommend our ubiquinol QH. We add a little bit of Vesi salt there as well to increase the bioavailability. And then to support your methylation cycle, we would recommend our Super B complex. So again, omega-3s, numerous health benefits. EPA, for example, is known to sort of decrease inflammation. EPA has been shown to restore a healthy chiurenine tryptophan ratio, for example, incredibly good for sort of cognitive health and for reducing the sort of symptoms associated with low mood. Omega-3, especially EPA, has been known to increase levels of brain-derived nerve growth factor. Many benefits of omega-3 associated with some of the kind of cardiovascular benefits, such as increased blood flow to the brain. Obviously, lowering things like triglycerides and cholesterol can be very beneficial as well. So there are numerous health benefits from omega-3. Again, the whole kind of jigsaw on what's doing what and quite how is still sort of being uncovered in terms of sort of the research. But what we do know is that those individuals who have the lowest intake of omega-3 tend to benefit the most from dietary intervention with omega-3. So this is where we kind of really sort of point out, you know, if you want to know what's going on, you need to test. So we generally sort of recommend our Optio3 biomarker test. So it tells you exactly what's going on in regards to omega-3 levels. It gives you information on your omega-3 index, which is obviously a sort of a risk factor for cardiovascular health. More recently, the omega-3 index has been associated with as a risk factor for sort of cognitive health as well. We also look at the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, but more specifically, we look at the AA to EPA ratio as a measurement of sort of silent and chronic inflammation. And then we give you a personalized plan which aims to bring the client into a very healthy area. So we give you a personalized dose based on body weight to achieve an omega-3 index of over 8% and an AA to EPA ratio, nice healthy between 1.5 and 3. we know that the benefits of increasing omega-3 actually go through to sort of reducing levels of pro-inflammatory mediators. So again, sort of neuroinflammation and cognitive decline and dementia have been associated with higher levels of pro-inflammatory products, including CRP, interleukin, TNF-alpha, and so on, all thought to be potential risk factors for cognitive decline. If you increase omega-3 levels through high concentrated fish oil supplements, then we see that they lower all of these inflammatory markers, not only in chronic non-autoimmune diseases, but with those with chronic autoimmune diseases and in healthy subjects. So that's all good. And what's really important is that longer duration of supplementation leads to a greater lowering effect. So again, it's the long-term benefits of long-term supplementation. And when it comes to actually the anti-inflammatory benefits of fish oil, we know that the relationship between EPA and DHA, the relationship is between the reducing capacity is greater for EPA than it is DHA. So DHA is absolutely great for sort of structural support. EPA is great for sort of anti-inflammatory. Okay, so I've talked earlier about kind of maybe slightly alarmist sort of benefits or anti-benefits of omega-3 in individuals who are sort of higher risk of sort of having higher levels of oxidative stress. And this is kind of where we really sort of get people to try to understand that, that you know, dosing with high volumes of omega-3 cannot always, or is not always sort of beneficial for the client. Flooding the body with concentrated omega-3s can potentially increase inflammation. It's more so in sort of nutritionally compromised individuals. Through the creation of sort of like these non-enzymic oxidation end products. So we do emphasize regular split dosing with small capsules and the addition of antioxidants as well. When it comes to looking at the results from intervention trials for omega-3, EPA and DHA, again, the jury is not quite out yet in regards to sort of exactly what does what. We do know that EPA is sort of the more anti-inflammatory of the two fatty acids. DHA is incredibly vital for sort of maintaining cell membrane integrity. But what we know is that definitely when it comes to sort of research with EPA or that sort of compares EPA and DHA directly is lacking, especially in the sort of setting of cognitive performance and impairment. And we need more experimental data really to sort of just really emphasize and clarify you know, the effectiveness of supplementation in terms of things like dose and the type of omega-3. And also we need to sort of look at sort of what we're actually targeting in regards to sort of omega-3 intervention. Are we looking at neurotransmission pathways? Are we looking at inflammation? Are we looking at neurogenesis? And sort of the area as well, because there are different sort of areas of sort of cognitive health. We're looking at memory, attention, stress, all of those kind of things as well. So this is where we kind of like look at our products and how we kind of tailor them to specific kind of areas and to specific clients as well. And so the first thing to sort of really emphasize before talking about our omega-3 supplements in detail is educating people on how to take fish oils. So unlike our competitors, we keep our capsules small. This not only helps to make them easier to swallow, but it actually encourages and highlights the importance of split dosing. Definitely when you were looking at sort of high doses of omega-3 over a gram, they should be distributed throughout the day. This helps not only with sort of digestion and uptake of fats, but it also ensures that blood levels are kept nicely sustained throughout the day. You know, and also, you know, don't take them on an empty stomach. Eating them with food is going to sort of increase the body's natural ability to digest and absorb. And we always sort of include a good antioxidant as well. So vitamin E, vitamin C, that kind of thing. And this helps to protect fatty acids from oxidation, both sort of pre and post digestion. When it comes to sort of antioxidant support, I've mentioned that we use ubiquinol. This is really kind of valid when we consider that ubiquinol deficiency can alter mitochondrial function, lower antioxidant status, lead to increased free radical generation, which again is kind of associated with cognitive decline. And, you know, we also know that sort of various sort of states of dementia are also associated with sort of poor mitochondrial function. So, increasing ubiquinol status can be incredibly beneficial, especially alongside omega-3 fatty acids. And this is our Vesisorb ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is not only acting as sort of as an energy sort of helping product, but it also acts as a really potent antioxidant and as a antioxidant recycler. So it actually also sort of kind of recharges other antioxidants such as vitamin C, E, and lipoic acid. So that's going to be beneficial too. And I mentioned earlier as well our Vesisorb delivery system, and this is really important because ubiquinol, like sort of standard CoQ10, is poorly bioavailable. So unless you're sort of helping it cross the sort of what's called the water layer, the soluble water layer that that exists between the sort of gut and the enterocytes, then the chances are that you're not going to be getting the benefits from your CoQ10 supplement. So we add Vesisorb to increase the bioavailability, and we've got a study here just kind of showing how, you know, boosting Vesisorb delivery actually helps to sort of achieve really nice therapeutic levels that last stronger and longer, as it were. And then our B complex, which is incredibly efficient for managing homocysteine. As with all the sort of ingredients within our products, we go for highly bioavailable. So our B vits are all sort of body ready. And I can kind of just sort of clarify what I mean by that. So, for example, we use folate in the form of quattrofolic, which provides the metabolic reduced folate form that's utilized and stored in the human body. And it also helps to overcome sort of accumulation of unmetabolized folic acid as well, which has fairly recently sort of been some sort of worrying information coming out there. We really don't know what the biological function and effects of unmetabolized folic acid are. So we know that quattrofolic is going to be the best source. Our vitamin B2 is as riboflavin 5-phosphate. Riboflavin has to be converted to its active form in order to be utilized. Absorption of riboflavin occurs in the upper GI tract. So if you've got a compromised digestive system, this can affect the body's ability to convert it. So if you just sort of supplement with riboflavin 5-phosphate, then you overcome that kind of issue. And then again, sort of like if you look at our B6, exists in 6 forms, but it's only actually the pyridoxal 5-phosphate form which has cofactor activity. So it's just kind of a few examples really of you know, how we think about what exactly is going into our products. Again, we go for small, easy to swallow. We go for split dosing to overcome bioavailability issues associated certainly with vitamin B12. Suitable for vegetarians and vegans, and because we do split dosing, we can do 1 tablet a day, suitable for children 7 and over. And then some of you will be aware of our Mind Care range. I was talking earlier about sort of, you know, the various areas of sort of cognitive health. And this is where we kind of really thought about our product range, and we do sort of targeted formulations. So this is a duo capsule system. So we provide an ultra concentrated Mind Care omega-3 EPA and DHA. We add vitamins D and vitamin E. So that's our little fish oil supplement here. And then we've got a different range, 4 different products that then focus on different various aspects of brain health. So we look at, we've got a product called Mind Care Balance, that combines micronutrients, vitamins E, D, B complex, folate, zinc and selenium, with magnesium, glycinate and theanine, to help with things like sort of stress and anxiety. Our Mind Care Focus combines those ingredients again with acetyl carnitine and threonine and taurine and caffeine, and this is to help with things like mental alertness, sport concentration, memory and focus. Our Mind Care Lift incorporates the ingredients with magnesium glycinate and 5-HTP. This is to sort of help regulate neurotransmitters and sort of help with mood balance. And then our product Mind Care Protect, we use alpha lipoic acid and resveratrol as antioxidants to help combat sort of neuroinflammation, and improve and support energy and metabolism in the brain. So this is a really good range of targeted brain sort of products. And so within the ingredients, we've kind of like really thought about supporting antioxidant defenses. So the sort of alpha lipoic acid, for example, in our Mind Care Protect, is useful for sort of reducing oxidative stress. It's also been shown to sort of scavenge lipid peroxidation products such as 5-NE, which I was talking about earlier. Obviously, we've got vitamin C and vitamin E in there as well. And there's this wonderful little relationship that goes on between sort of vitamins, these vitamins and CoQ10 as well. So there's a lot of recycling going on, which is incredibly useful for sort of supporting antioxidant defenses. You're probably all aware as well of, you know, all this kind of like alarmist news that we've had. Everybody in the UK is now vitamin D deficient almost. And so, you know, there are various mechanisms by which vitamin D is known to have benefits for sort of improving cognitive health and reducing cognitive decline, anything through from sort of improving neurotransmitter function through to supporting inflammation and immune function. Reducing oxidative stress, and obviously it's sort of role in calcium homeostasis and vascular processes. So lots of evidence supporting healthy vitamin D status for certainly for sort of various aspects of general health and for cognitive health as well. So if you're taking any of our Mind Care range, or if you're taking our Farmipa Maintain product, then you'll be getting a really good dose of vitamin D3. And then in our Mind Care Balance and in our Mind Care Lift, we've incorporated magnesium as magnesium glycinate to improve the bioavailability and give you a good dose of a good dose of magnesium, as well as the glycine there, which can help to promote healthy immune function and digestive and central nervous systems. And magnesium is also incredibly beneficial for sort of vitamin B6 absorption as well. And then throughout our Mind Care range, we've also incorporated zinc and selenium, both of which are known to play really important roles in sort of memory and cognitive function as well. So obviously zinc is known to play a role in sort of neurotransmitter structure and function and so on. Selenium is vital for things like glutathione production, and it's a main component of many of our sort of antioxidant enzymes. And importantly, as I was suggesting earlier, is that low selenium status is certainly known to be a risk factor for cognitive decline. And as the sort of evidence is coming in, many of us may well actually be relatively low in selenium if we're not getting plenty through our diet. And then just to sort of finish off with our range, some of our newer products. Some of you be aware of our new Pure Essentials range. So this is a 1-a-day capsule of EPA and DHA. So again, we keep our capsules as small as we can. This is a slightly larger capsule than you'll get with our therapeutic range, our Farmipa range, but it's designed to be kind of a 1-a-day for individuals who just need a bit of sort of extra support in terms of sort of increasing omega-3, but then we've got 1,000 IU of vitamin D in there as well, so it's kind of a really good all-rounder when it comes to sort of like sourcing a good quality omega-3, high EPA to DHA ratio. and we add a little bit of lemon oil in there as well, just to make it slightly tastier, I guess, and to stop those sort of fishy reflux if you get those. And then the newest product to our range, and this is literally just come out this week, so we're very proud to introduce our new Pure Essentials multivitamin and mineral. Again, we're incredibly fussy about what goes in, so you'll be looking at a good quality multivitamin and mineral product. We've got 22 key essential vitamins and minerals, incorporating the full spectrum B complex, again using all the sort of body ready active forms of B2, B6, folate, vitamin B12 and so on. I got a little bit of iron in there, but we use iron bisglycinate, so that's well absorbed, gentle on the stomach, and our other ingredients such as iodine is naturally sourced. So yeah, so this is our newest to our range, and I hope you'll take a look at that one, because that's going to be a good seller, I think. And so that's really kind of the end of the webinar today. If you'd like any information on any of the products that I've spoken today about, you can either contact myself. If you'd like any sort of educational support, or if you want any more information, you can contact my colleague Sophie, who will be delighted to give you any information that you require. Otherwise, we'll be sending out the webinar slides to you in the next week or so. If anybody has any questions, I'll be quite happy to answer them now, or you can contact me directly later. Right, in that case, if there's no questions, I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming and attending the webinar today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.